Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable on leveraging science and tech diplomacy for global cooperation. My name is Sophie Schönborn. I'm a researcher at the Technical University of Munich and at the Technical University of Munich's think tank, TUM Think Tank. TUM Think Tank is a part of the global network of Internet and Society Centers, NOC, which is bringing all of us here together today. I'm happy to moderate today's roundtable and kick us off into today's session. Science and tech diplomacy have become some kind of increasingly talked about buzzwords in the past 15 to 20 years. They're ideas that link science and tech to the world of diplomacy, international relations, and global governance. But as with so many other things, of course, there are no universally agreed upon definitions for either of the two, or even related terms. What have emerged are a couple of common concepts, and I just briefly want to introduce one classification of those to frame the following discussion. The Royal Society has outlined 3 dimensions for science diplomacy in 2010, which are oftentimes referred to. These cover the 3 terms science in diplomacy, science for diplomacy, and diplomacy for science. What does that mean? Science in diplomacy typically refers to activities that use scientific knowledge to inform foreign policy and policy more broadly. They could be through individual science attachés, individual scientists or technologists, but also institutions or networks of institutions. Then when we look at diplomacy for science, we recognize it's not just a one-way street. We can also use diplomatic tools and channels to support scientific and technological cooperation. Thirdly, science for diplomacy, so not in but for, sees science and technology more as soft power elements for promoting international policy goals, for promoting foreign policy agendas, for example, by promoting open values or evidence-based decision-making, but also to build bridges to improve international relations in times where diplomatic channels may erode or temporarily not function for those goals. These dimensions, of course, are super broad, not mutually exclusive, but I think what they show is that there can really be a range of actors involved in science and tech diplomacy, and also that this really covers a range of activities that we can engage in. Now, 2025, IGF, we live in times of geopolitical tensions. We're searching for trusted partnerships, new alliances, and of course there's ongoing technological developments and efforts for global digital governance, be it through the IGF, WSIS 20, and so on. And we may be looking, especially with the ideas of multi-stakeholderism, for what actually the roles of different stakeholder groups are and how we individually can contribute to those. So against this backdrop, we're coming together today to explore with our esteemed speakers, but also with the audience, what the role of non-traditional diplomatic actors or actors can be in science and technology diplomacy. Non-traditional in the sense that we're not looking at diplomats, at foreign federal agencies, but really at actors from science, civil society, and the technical communities and how they can contribute. No easy questions and multiple at that, but that's why I'm really happy to have with me such experts from really a range of stakeholder groups and backgrounds. I'm briefly introducing by the order of appearance with their inputs. First of all, online, I hope we can see our speakers online. Nele Liosk is joining us, former ambassador at large for digital affairs of Estonia, now a team lead at Knowledge Hub Digital for the European Commission, and joining us online. We're seeing someone else then up there. I'm really sorry for that. I'll continue with the introductions, and then I hope we see also the speakers up there. Marisela Munoz is joining us, Director for External Affairs at GESTA, the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator. Armando Guyo Español, the Executive Director of the Global Network of Internet and Society Centers, NOC, also joining us online. I hope you'll see a picture of him soon. Here in person with us, Isabel Aqua, the Africa Director of CERTA Foundation, Pan-African legal think tank based in Rwanda. Victor Munoz, engineer, entrepreneur, and former Director General of the Administration of the Presidency in Colombia, long affiliation, Jan Gerlach, Director Public Policy at Wikimedia Foundation, and Lucien Castex, Policy Representative and Advisor to the CEO of AFNIC, the French Network Information Center. Thank you all for being with us here today. Before we get started, some very quick notes on housekeeping. We will hear brief interventions, max 5 minutes, from each of our roundtable speakers. So please, in the audience, collect your questions. We will have time for discussion briefly at the end of the session. As this is only 60 minutes, we have to stick close to the schedule. We have an online moderator for the audience online. Please just put your questions in the chat and we will hear them here in person. So without further ado, let me start by turning to Nele Leosk online and after that Marisela Munoz to hear from your experience how science and tech diplomacy can contribute to digital governance initiatives and what role non-traditional actors actually play and what they may look to in the future. Nele, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello everybody, and hello from Tallinn, quite close but still remote, but happy to be here. Sophia, if you may, you actually refer to governments as traditional actors in tech diplomacy, and having been Estonia's digital ambassador, I'm actually wondering whether governments are already traditional actors in technology diplomacy, because technology or the role of technology is still quite new, I would say, to traditional diplomacy, and actually quite a lot has happened in a very short time, but still a short time, and I would say that many diplomats actually find themselves in a rather new role in these current times when private sector and I would say even individual players have so much power that often we seem that they have more power than actually these traditional actors as governments. So I think diplomats also have quite a bit still to do to get used to this new environment and also realize that technology is actually shaping our world and will shape it more by every day. But maybe just to come back to your question about what is the role of tech diplomacy and the different actors in this, I think it depends on our starting point. So what we actually need to do. So I served as Estonia's digital ambassador, and that means I come from a very small country that is tech savvy, is known to be a digital leader in deploying technology, but of course is not the technology hub in terms of technological innovation per se. Technological development still take place mainly in other countries, and I would say increasingly in very few countries and also in very few companies. So for us, the starting point, I would say, was maybe twofold. First, of course, we have been working and will work for what we call let's say, the democratic development of digitalization. We want to have the virtual world be open and secure and all these nice things we are fighting for here at the IGF also. But I would say increasingly important really becomes an understanding and the work we need to do in order to make sure that everybody in our society, so everybody in Estonia, actually has these necessary skills and knowledge to continue to be able to use technology and including for our benefit. So when I look back, perhaps my almost 5 years in Estonia's government, and I put the Europe aside for today, I will focus perhaps on Estonia. Then what are the means that a small country really has? Of course, as you also mentioned, one line of work is really the technology governance. So how we are supposed to use technologies. We know what we do in our country. Okay, we have in Europe, we have also European Union that plays a big role in shaping, let's say, the virtual space. And I think EU is quite known for its regulatory activity, but not only. And now we have these global developments. And I do have to admit that when I look at, for example, the process of a global digital compact, the VCs plus 20, and the other processes that we all know, that we are all part of governments or private sector, it is actually quite complex to follow these, especially when I look, for example, the private sector players or even academia in Estonia. So here, definitely, let's say the traditional actors need to collaborate closely with non-traditional actors, as you categorize them. So what we had said in Estonia, we had I would say a rather loose network of private sector players, but we also had some more institutionalized ways to share information with each other. We had a digital diplomacy coordination council also that included all the main players outside government, where we would share what's happening, and they would also reflect back on their needs. But the second component, as I started, and I know that I have only 4 minutes, so I will close it here as just an introductory remark, is really building these partnerships that support our partners. Are they in academia, in private sector? Are they in NGOs? And here I would say that looking from the government perspective, or let's say the tech diplomat perspective, it's not, of course, just a matter of just the diplomat. So I think what here was really crucial, not only for Estonia, but also for the European Union, was to take, let's say, this holistic approach to tech diplomacy, where we would understand that technology is not just a matter of tech diplomats or science diplomats or innovation diplomats or cyber diplomats. There are so many of them, but it's also a matter of trade and trade negotiations. It's a matter of development cooperation. It's a matter of security, democracy, and human rights. It's everything that we as diplomats do. And I would say that all these partnerships would need to feed into all these mechanisms that are in place, or maybe that need to be still introduced within all these different policy areas. And the role of a tech diplomat here is, I would say, bring this all together, have this umbrella and support all these different areas. But I will end from my side here, and I'm happy to stay, of course, listen to my good colleagues and have the discussion later. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Nele. Thank you, Nele. That turns us over to Marisela Munoz really well. You look at the future of science and diplomacy. How would you add to this?
Thank you so much, Sophie. So I'm struggling looking at the timer there because the topic is so rich that it's difficult to only talk for 4 or 5 minutes. So bear with me. I'll do my best. But I think that Nele was able to do a very great job of framing the conversation. So first, I think that sometimes when we talk about science and diplomacy, and you refer to those incredible insights that were shared by the Royal Society and others a few years back, we forget that science and diplomacy has been a player, since centuries ago, because we have worked in collaborative platforms as humanity for centuries as well. And I think that the IGF is the perfect example of this sort of collaboration. Is not trivial, that is a multi-stakeholder endeavor, and that we also have the voice of underrepresented regions. So as we establish that, I think that my insights would like to contribute in the line of what is missing, or how can we may strengthen that collaborative platform. And I think that anticipation is that ingredient, because we're living in an era of accelerated science and technology is really coming at a breadth and a speed that is almost difficult to navigate. And the what is identifying what are these trends, how can we make sure that apart from the current conversations that we have on topics that are very, very timely, we also take a minute to think of what's coming. And I think that there is a cost implicit in not doing that. For example, when we talk about the digital divide, well, quantum computing and quantum technologies, for example, will exacerbate that divide if we do not make the transitions collectively among all sectors and among all geographies to make sure that we use the opportunities to also enhance digital cooperation and to enhance governance that should be anticipatory. So at JESDA, we developed a digital tool that is called the Science Breakthrough Radar and has some of these technological platforms as a way of providing a source of truth. It's produced with over 2,000 scientists from all around the world, but not only, social scientists, diplomats, private sector, and citizens as well. And this is the first part of how we can strengthen anticipation in the Internet Governance Forum arena. The second part will be so what? What do we do with this knowledge as we build futures literacy, as many refer to it? How can we make sure that the honest broker platform that we have built here over the years is also in a space to develop solutions and action-oriented initiatives? So just as well with the collaboration of many of you and really an incredible lineup of partners, we have developed some of these ideas into something which is materialized as a way to prove that science diplomacy is also action. Now, it's not only discussions, and this example is the Open Quantum Institute that was incubated at JESTA and is now embedded at CERN with the collaboration also of the private sector, where we're basically accelerating the dialogue to develop solutions, use cases, and applications that benefit to humanity, so that tackle the SDGs. And we're talking about things that can be, done in a collaborative manner through the cloud. So again, the component of digital is very much present, but also the sense of the multi-stakeholder approach. And finally, then what, which is very similar, I draw a parallelism with the methodology that we have developed at JESDA, is how can we make sure that all this dialogue, but also the action-oriented initiative, converge into the strengthening of a robust community of practice that enhances precisely digital cooperation with this future outlook, with this futures thinking. I think that in that mix, in that recipe, we can add the responsible innovation, the values that should shape what we do as well, and make sure that we reinforce the current multilateral dialogues and negotiations with a cooperation that takes into consideration what's coming. I think that science and technology need to be immersed in the anticipatory governance, and if we do it in a by design kind of matter, we can make sure that what we have built here will continue to stand the test of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisela. You really point out how action-oriented communities and different kinds of actors really can and should engage in developing solutions, which I think brings us very well to Armando Goya Español online and then Isabel Aqua. Could you share with us a bit about the role that you see different kinds of networks actually taking in those kind of initiatives, building action-oriented solutions and practices? Armando, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sophie, and it's great, of course, to see you all and to share this panel with such a great group of esteemed colleagues. I'm here in Boston, but very happy to almost feel in there in Oslo. And of course, as you mentioned, I would like to share a little bit more about the global network of internet and society centers, the work we do, and of course, how it relates with this big question about tech diplomacy and science diplomacy. So, the Global Network of Centers, also known as NOC, it's a network of 130, now we are 140 centers from around the world, academic centers that are working together towards perhaps bringing ideas and trying to accelerate conversations that we need to have all over the world about the use of the internet, about new technologies, about AI, of course, quantum computing, the metaverse, and many other emerging technologies that we have in the world and that basically have also a global impact. And that's perhaps one of the biggest issues that we have right now. The world is taking us towards a state of fragmentation, where it's taking us towards a state of thinking for ourselves, of more national than international projects, and to localize some of these ideas, and also the use of some of this infrastructure. In the global network of centers, we believe that we need to continue this kind of engagement with different centers and colleagues around the world, as we believe that this is going to be essential for many of the future conversations that we should have, and of course, of the projects and ideas that should come in the next years, especially when we are talking about the impact of technologies that are not considering borders, frontiers, that are actually moving in many different ways beyond that. So in that regard, I think that the network of centers and the work we're doing, and many of the colleagues here are part of this network, perhaps on the point of scientific diplomacy and science diplomacy, we have 3 points that I would like to highlight. The first one is that academic networks can work as policy bridges. This idea of a policy bridge, in which basically we are a bridge between some academic experts and policymakers. And the interesting thing is that we have been able to connect experts with countries that and with policymakers in many different countries, in which sometimes they don't even consider to be working with or to have an impact on. So it's interesting to see, for example, how colleagues in Oslo are contributing to colleagues in Colombia and to policymakers in Colombia, such as Victor Munoz, that will, of course, explain later a little bit more of his experience, or colleagues in Singapore are helping other colleagues in Africa to perhaps think about their next steps on AI governance. And examples like this is what we have at the network of centers. Basically, these kind of collaborations, inter-regional collaborations that are so important right now. And that's what we try to do, to become these policy bridges. At the same time, we try to become policy bridges with the evidence, and basically to bring evidence to policy making and to policy conversations. And I think that's also something very important to consider from the science diplomacy side. How important it is to become an ambassador, not only of ideas, but at the same time of evidence, and good evidence and research that can inform the policy-making process. Now we're having a lot of conversations about, again, AI governance, internet governance, the future of work, what are the next skills, what's really working and what's really not. And that's what we're trying to do here. That's the kind of bridge that we're trying to create and generate by connecting this audience of policy and decision makers, for example, with academia, with experts, and with this kind of work that sometimes is not that easily available as we believe it could be. And at the same time, we are also helping to generate capacities within our members, and at the same time our NOC colleagues, in the sense that we're trying to help them to have enough knowledge about what they're doing, what their last research trends are, what kind of research is having more impact. And that also, I believe, it's quite important for many of our colleagues also to have and increase their relevance in the national policy conversations they are involved in. So that will be the first point. Then I would like to talk a little bit more about the collaboration and the collaboration side. I think that science diplomacy through collaboration is essential, and that's basically one of the terms. It sounds sometimes, and people say, you talk a lot about collaboration, and I say, yeah, because that's what we do, and although it sounds as a very basic term sometimes, collaboration, it's not difficult to build, and it's, I think, of the essence, especially for this kind of science diplomacy efforts. So what's collaboration? Basically building something meaningful, creating trust, building that trust in a way in which basically entities want to really collaborate with each other, participate on grant applications, on funding mechanisms, to share knowledge, data. That's not as easy as it seems to be. And sometimes there's not enough trust in order to have this kind of meaningful collaboration. And that's something which we basically are trying to work more and more to increase this kind of efforts and these kind of meetings and the work we do. And of course, efforts such as the ones we're doing to build these bridges again is very important in that sense, in the collaboration and in the work that we're trying to achieve. And then finally, we have this perhaps last element, that is that we're trying to also look into these non-traditional actors as system stewards and as stewards of digital collaboration and digital cooperation in that sense. So we really believe that we cannot just fully rely, and I think the geopolitical moment in which we are is showing us that we cannot just fully rely on institutions that are traditionally seen as the institutions where these conversations should be taking place, or where these diplomatic efforts should be taking place. We believe that we need to be a little bit more creative and innovative, and think on non-traditional actors and non-traditional scenarios as big elements of some of the debate of the dialogues that we want to have, and at the same time to become like this kind of forums for many of us to participate and be involved. And that's why we believe at the network of centers that we really want to increase this kind of work, especially with non-traditional actors and with other stakeholders, and to build that kind of engagement in a very different and meaningful way. And that perhaps, and becoming stewards also of that digital cooperation, of observing and monitoring how this cooperation is taking place and the kind of alliances that are being built, is something that we believe is very important. And of course, we have many examples. So just as the last point, we have many examples of how this is working. But basically, what I can say, it's like this IGF panel is a big example of where we're also trying to achieve. And thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you for these really active calls for more of these initiatives. Heading over right to Isabel Aqua, maybe you can share some examples of one of those centers from the network of centers about your actions and experiences.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and to all my panelists. Thank you, Armando. I think he really set the tone. We joined NOC about 2 years ago, so we're really one of the baby centers, a few that have joined since. And I think I'll look at it from 3 perspectives: Africa's position, the really intensive role of peer learning, and then the multi-stakeholder governance. So I think when you look at Africa's perspective, and I've been walking through the IGF, and there's so much negative. It's 1% of research papers are from Africa, 1% of data center capacity. All of those things are true. But I think when you look at it from a global cooperation perspective, these challenges are really an opportunity for us to collaborate, the word that Armando used. And I think that's the exciting thing, right? There's a lot of challenges, but those same challenges are really truly opportunities for global cooperation, looking at ways that we can enhance research. How can we build academic partnerships so that you have people going from institutions in Rwanda, which is where we're based, we're Rwandan founded think tank, but we're Pan-African focused. So how do we take young students from Rwanda who are incredibly brilliant but don't necessarily have all the resources and bring them to Oslo or to Germany, etc.? And we're doing a lot of that cooperation already, because there is really an opportunity for us to think more broadly when we have these sort of networks. As Armando said, it's 140 people, which means you have these incredible opportunities to build knowledge and to think about things through different lenses. And I think it's important, of course, the imperative is for the African governments and African ecosystem and African lawyers and policymakers to figure out how we're going to deal when we're looking at AI governance, for example. It is their imperative. However, when you think about the fact that the global population will be 1 in 4 African, it becomes an international obligation, right? So we have to think as an international body, how do we make sense of that, and how do we collaborate on that? The second thing I would say, which is really, for me, very unique about the NOC, is truly peer learning. And I say that because I think you can have a lot of organizations that sort of have this tiered system. What I find is that when we are doing projects together, it really is around collaboration. It's really about recognizing that there shouldn't be gaps in knowledge, and recognizing that whoever's on the ground has the expertise. And so you're seeing a lot of collaboration. We're launching today Frontiers report on digital child safety. you cannot have that report just from a US perspective. It has to have a global mandate. And that's something that, it's an example of collaborating on digital technologies and digital governance that really shows people working as peers. And I think when you look at it from an African perspective, a lot of the peer relationships, I would say the traditional relationships, are really based on historical relationships, i.e. colonial relationships, or funding patterns. And so what tends to happen is I will sit in, Rwanda or Burundi or Kenya, and I'm mostly speaking to maybe the British because that's my traditional relationship partner, or I'm speaking to X, country because that's my traditional funding partner. And what you have when you have these sort of the NOC format, it means I can speak to people in Brazil because it makes more sense for me when I'm looking at, for example, the effect of sustainability challenges where not the same, but you have similar developmental challenges, you have similar inclusivity challenges, etc. So how do you break out of the mold of traditional actors and make sure that you can reach out to people who are actually more akin to what you need and actually have those solutions? And so I think what you find is the sense of, science and tech diplomacy really working because you really have this opportunity for true peer learning within the NOC structure. And then the last thing I would say is just going on about collaboration and multi-stakeholder engagement. That's super important. So again, when you think about the number of policymakers that actually have the competence when you're looking at AI governance across the continent, very, very minimal. So what we decided to do, and again, co-hosting this, co-convening this with the Global Network of Centers, is to host a multi-stakeholder meeting that brought in big tech, the startup community, policymakers. We had 20 policymakers and regulators from across the continent. And also, of course, some of our NOC peers. Armando was in Kigali, and providing sort of like not a global, this is what we're doing, follow what we're doing, but this is what we're doing insights panel, and what can we learn from each other. And that was really well received, and I think that's a format we really experimented with, this innovative governance structure, because we really are learning at the same pace. And to be honest, the startup community is who's really leading, and we're already following behind. And so I really see that multi-stakeholder engagement as a really critical piece of what we're trying to do. We're hosting our next innovative governance multi-stakeholder meeting in Accra. So again, bringing in different players, having more of a West African feel to the conversation. So very important that we have these sort of collaborative opportunities and recognize that these non-traditional actors are actually more nimble to make a lot of headway and to collaborate much more seamlessly and not think through traditional channels, but bringing together civil society, like our organization, Certa Foundation, academia, but then also pulling in government and the tech community, et cetera, and to pull together a real document. So those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I think both you and Armando really underline how networked actors, how connections internationally can provide platforms for trying out new things, for collaborating, building together, and then also informing policy with regional and global knowledge and capacity, also outside of classical, traditional ways of doing things, of funding things maybe. And that leads us to our last three speakers who are all here in person, who have a range of experiences in government and civil society institutions and the technical community. So maybe giving it to the three of you, just one after the other, what are your perspectives on what these kind of communities and other actors can contribute to the conversation? Let's start with Victor.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie, and hello, everyone. The first thing is, it is an honor for me to be here. And I just would like to mention a real case in Colombia. Basically, I would like to share how Colombia experience offer a real-world case of successful science diplomacy in action, or science for diplomacy, according with the Sophie's definition. And between 2018 and 2022, Colombia launched its AI expert mission as a centerpiece of our national AI strategy. It is important to mention that what initiative was co-sponsored by CAF, that is a development bank in Latin America, and also the Inter-American Development Bank, that are an important actors in that conversation related with science diplomacy. The expert mission was led by Sandra Cortesi from Harvard Berman Klein Center, and for the Professor Gasser from TUM University in Munich. And also more than 7 members from different centers of the network of centers. At that moment, we knew that we need everyone at the table, academics, government, industry, and civil society, to make the most scientific knowledge and protect our country's interests. We even asked development banks to act like as supporters of science diplomats, helping us connect with experts around the world instead of relying only on government offices. Usually the development banks are focused on roads and bridges, but that was the first time that basically they work in Latin America, supporting a country like Colombia, building in our AI plans. At the same time, we support these development banks in the process to escalate direct collaboration between international experts and regional decision makers. That was a win-win process that we have with them, an entirely new model for institutions that had previously focused almost in infrastructure. I would like to mention 4 big wins that we have with the expert mission, because it is important to know that when you talk about science diplomacy, that you have papers. Really, we didn't have papers. We had a real strategy, and we implemented that strategy into the country. The first thing is that we had a clear technical roadmap for AI policy in Colombia. The second one was an ethical AI framework to guide the public sector in the AI pilot projects on safety, fairness, and community input. The third one was a skills roadmap to close our digital talent gap that was implemented in the last 4 years, and also the recommendations. And we have now 2 centers for AI excellence, one in Bogota and one in Medellin, that we have working together. We have researchers, companies, startups, and students that they are working together and they are learning, and we are in the process to implement the new generation of the AI policy. It is important to mention that the expert mission recommendations are a proof that the science diplomacy doesn't remain confined to policy papers. It creates concrete tools, infrastructure, and institutional capacity. And if we are looking ahead, I see 3 lessons for our countries in Latin America. The first thing is that teamwork, bringing many voices together, backed by development banks and universities, turn plans into action fast. Trust, building ethical rules with everyone's input creates clear, fair guidelines. An ecosystem, connecting policymakers with startups, spread the good practices quickly. Our Colombian playbook is already being shared across the region. Experts that was part of our mission had advised governments like Brazil, Chile, Dominican Republic, and Uruguay in their own agendas. And these efforts and recent reports and case studies demonstrate that science diplomacy is scalable, replicable, and have an opportunity to improve really the tech and to close the gap that we have in the regions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor. Handing it over right to Jan.
Yeah, hello, thanks for having me. I'm Jan Gerlach. I'm at the Wikimedia Foundation. We are the nonprofit that hosts and supports Wikipedia. And I want to quickly focus on the word collaboration, which I'm very happy to have heard a couple of times already now. And it's an integral part of digital cooperation. Wikipedia really is, I would say, peak collaboration on the internet. It's open source, and people from all over the world work together in a collaborative manner to add and improve content all around the world, I said, all around the clock as well. And to describe it in a way that probably resonates with a lot of the people who are in the academic side here and in the scientific community, Wikipedia is a massive peer review system. It gets better the more people add to it, the more people work on it together and edit each other's work. Wikipedia has been very successful this way. Wikipedia has just crossed the milestone of 65 million articles across roughly 300 languages, and it'll celebrate its 25th anniversary next year. But it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Let's be clear about that. It's an integral part of an open internet, which in turn depends on digital cooperation by all these non-traditional and traditional actors in this space. Around the world, this open internet is actually under threat right now, as I probably don't have to explain to all of you. So this is a very timely matter for stakeholders from the academic world, from the scientific community, and in tech diplomacy to be asking themselves how to engage and asking themselves the question of digital cooperation, how to empower actors in this world, and really with the goal of keeping us all connected. I think it's really important to ask towards what goal are we actually cooperating. Cooperation should not be the means, right? The goal itself, but there is a larger goal, which is to benefit us all, to work towards the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And when we ask what these stakeholders need in order to be empowered in the conversation of digital cooperation, of course, multi-stakeholderism, multi-stakeholder approaches come to mind again. They've already been mentioned in the introduction here. And I think everyone here is also aware that it's going to require a big push by everyone involved to ensure these policy spaces remain open for such approaches, so civil society, academia, the science community, and others can continue to contribute. As the Global Digital Compact is being implemented, multi-stakeholderism is key. It is crucial to making sure that digital public goods, like Wikipedia, can continue to thrive and be supported. But of course, the science community, through research, can also represent the needs of those who may never have a voice in digital governance. Finally, and I'll keep this short, an important part of the mix are the tools that we offer these non-traditional stakeholders for policy making, for governance, for digital cooperation. And one tool that we offer is a specific frame of thinking. We call this the Wikipedia test. Maybe you've already heard of it, maybe it's new. We ask everyone, including non-traditional actors, all stakeholders, to really consider the impact of any actions, of policies, of regulations on Wikipedia before making decisions. The point is this: if policies and actions are bad for Wikipedia, they harm the open internet and many digital public goods. In contrast, what supports Wikipedia, what's good for Wikipedia, will be beneficial for online communities and for access to knowledge for everyone. And this in turn, of course, benefits digital cooperation as well, as we come here together in the physical space but have remote participants on this panel as well. I think this really shows how an open internet actually is also the basis for digital cooperation itself. So this is all closely interwoven. So again, the tool that we use and that we want to offer everyone is the Wikipedia test. Think of Wikipedia before you take action, before you regulate, before you propose policies even. And talk to us if you want to learn more about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Handing over to Lucien directly.
Thank you, Sophie. That is a timely discussion indeed. Science diplomacy and having it framed in a global debate on the internet governance and enhanced cooperation, digital cooperation, a lot of definition and methodologies are needed. I wanted to start by highlighting that the information society envisioned as a people-centered, inclusive and development-oriented is today of a renewed importance with this review coming this year. And the internet technical community as a stakeholder group has a main role, basically. It's to operate the core function, the key underlying infrastructures supporting the internet, in particular IP addresses, domain names. And one I mean, one key point is one always speaks from somewhere, and operating internet, running an internet registry like AFNIC give you concrete examples actually on the working function of the internet. Same goes for a regional internet registry or working with ICANN, for example. Since the WSS in 2003, 2005, the internet evolved a lot. It's still evolving today with new protocols discussed at the IETF, new network being created and connected to the global internet. And in that sense, navigating the rough seas of internet global governance has been challenging. Internet as a key underlying infrastructure which has enabled the information society and shown its resilience and importance in supporting actually the development of societies, access to culture and knowledge is key, and as a key component having a global, open, secure and interoperable internet has shown successes. In that sense, and it's been said already, the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance in its diversity, I mean, IGF, of course, here in Oslo today, but also IETF, ICANN, and AFNIC as well. It's a variety of models which are multi-stakeholder, and the participation of the different kinds of actors is key to actually enabling the diversity of viewpoints. Technical and academic communities can help find innovative solutions, science, diplomacy effort, enabling collaboration between stakeholders to share knowledge from research project to academic partnership, but also finding concrete examples and successes of the internet, which is of a renewed importance today, of course. So broader participation also means local processes, building on cultural and linguistic diversity, bringing voices together in the diversity of languages. I'm thinking about, for example, also the local, regional Internet Governance Forum. It needs to be discussed here in Oslo and everywhere else as well to actually enable real collaboration. And then finally, as we approach the 20-year review of the WSS, it's especially important to ensure that the review is actually inclusive and open to stakeholder inputs, obviously academia and technical community. But this is not an easy question in today's complex and geopolitical landscape. Wanted in that respect to highlight the work done last year in 2024 at Net Mundial +10 held in Sao Paulo that resulted in the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines, which offer a proposed approach to digital governance and inclusive dialogue between stakeholders. With the element paper just released a few days ago, there is a clear need of engagement to ensure that the multi-stakeholder model is properly leveraged in 2025 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the panel and the audience. I think those statements and contributions really show how this is an ongoing project of bringing technology and science and diplomacy together. And maybe we're all non-traditional or new actors in that sense, as Neil Elias pointed out. While we open the floor to questions in person, please step to the microphones. Online, feel free to submit your questions to the chat. I would just continue some reflections about what we just heard about technology really warranting us to engage with it across government and society, to collaborate and to shape our joint futures. And while times are, of course, complex and hard, we're not hopeless. We heard about different tools, how we can shape and contribute and learn from each other, be it in anticipation, be it by using the Wikipedia test before issuing policies, thinking about novel approaches that we can take, for example, in funding AI policy and stakeholder engagement, or fostering local and regional engagement and collaboration. If there is no questions in the room, I would just take it back to all of our wonderful speakers, because we have started talking about specific methods and tools and collaborations. But if I could ask you for one call to action or action point for either your own organization or for other stakeholders, what would it be? Maybe we start with our online speakers. Nele Leosk, would you like to start?
Hello again, and thank you, Sophie. I think I would call us all to co-create across sectors, but across borders, because what we have realized after the 20, 30 plus years of digitalization, or let's say more active digitalization, is that our needs and our problems are actually quite similar, and the solutions could also be. However, what we do not see that much yet is really creating our solutions together. We have some examples. I can bring, of course, from Estonia, the very famous digital identity that we have developed and use also across private and public sector, but also across border. Some of you may know there is a Nordic Institute of Interoperability Solutions, where we together with Finland, Iceland, and by now also some other partners, develop digitalization components that are crucial. I would say the cornerstone of Estonia's digitalization. And this has helped us, of course, to save financial resources, but I would say what is even more important, it has really allowed us to pull together human resources, because we all lack the needed technological skills. And I'm really glad that our Finnish, Icelandic partners and contributors from different sectors have become also part of our own digital ecosystem here in Estonia. There could be other examples, but I leave it to the colleagues to add here. But thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Armando.
Yeah, well, thank you. And adding to that, I think Nell's point, it's quite important. I would like to emphasize that one of the things I think we should be working more on, it's on reducing information asymmetries, especially about the new technologies and the kind of technology that is being developed. I think that is still a big challenge, and we need to do more about this. And I think this kind of networks and science diplomacy and the kind of channels that we're creating should try to work towards reducing those asymmetries, especially about the kind of technological development that we have. And we need to take policymakers, decision makers from all over the world and show them the technology. So if we're talking about quantum technology, what is quantum technology? Where is it? How do you try to experience more of it? If we're talking about the most advanced AI systems, where are those? How can we bring policymakers from different parts of the world to get closer to these systems and understand more of what they're doing? So trying to do that, working actively on doing that, and bringing people together and to bring them also to the science part and to the technical developments, it's something that I think we need to continue to work. And again, reducing those information asymmetries is of the essence if we really want to have an inclusive and sustainable future and technological future, and of course to build policies that are also sustainable in the long term. So that will be my call to action. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you. Turning over to our speakers in the room who have an eye on the clock, maybe just go one by one.
Thank you, Sophie. Well, I think that is no secret that we're living difficult times, polarization, fragmentation, geopolitical tensions, transformation of the world order. So I think that we need to together defend the trust in science. We have been talking about evidence-based policy making, but also action, and also this anticipatory governance outlook, making sure that we prepare, that we democratize access to science and to knowledge, which has also been mentioned, so that we can all co-create the futures that we desire, respecting the values that we want to uphold. And I think that that will be my call to action: trust in science and anticipatory science, diplomacy and governance.
I think for me, at the moment, I think you can look at Africa's governance, AI adoption and governance as a ripple, but actually it's a wave. I think it's important that we work together to actually ride the wave and not get crushed by it. Africa is going to be not just a consumer market, but a lot of innovation is going to come from the continent. A lot of data is needed from the continent when you look at things like the data we need to feed climate AI models. And so I think it's important that we look at really innovative structures, this multi-stakeholder engagement, and learning from each other. Like Armando was saying, I think you've got to bring the policy people to the tech people and make sure they actually understand. You cannot regulate what you don't understand. And I think that's a big, big gap. And that can be filled when you have true multi-stakeholder engagement.
I would like to emphasize in the call to action that it is important to trust in science, because if we are at this moment in a polarization, we are having a complex situation in terms of geopolitics. It is important to believe. It is important to believe in science. And it is important to have alternative challenge to have conversations between different regions. At this moment, for any reasons, we are having a different situations in terms of geopolitics agendas, but we can continue having the conversation through science. And that is my call to actions. Science, it is not geopolitics.
My call to action would be think of Wikipedia before making decisions about the internet, but more also work with your local volunteer communities who collect and build knowledge. Many of them are researchers themselves, they're scientists, they're experts in other fields, and they know what's needed locally.
And it's always complicated to be to be last. But I think having a forward-looking view beyond 2025, what do we actually want out, of internet, out of the multi-stakeholder governance model? What do you want to do with it? And navigating internet governance actually require multi-stakeholder dialogue. We can completely see it, but also a need to showcase concrete examples and successes of that multi-stakeholder collaboration. And for that, we need to actually work with each other. For example, AFNIC, we collaborate with, obviously, the Center of Internet and Society in France and in the Internet and Regulation Research Group to try to foster research and collaborative project. Last example is a publicity kind of, we have a post-quantum report that we do with I3C, which is a dynamic coalition at the IGF, to try to inform the global debate. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the speakers and the audience, the speakers especially, in keeping their times and sharing such valuable and interesting perspectives. This whole session leaves me, with an outlook that we have lots of things to do, but actually that we can do things and can contribute to ongoing governance discourses and actually implementing actionable outcomes and projects. I look forward to the collaboration with all of you, and thank you so much for joining.
And thank you, Sophie.